The Panzer Dragoon series can be pretty difficult to get into these days, as you probably know if you're watching this video. After discovering the series myself and spending a frustrating amount of time dealing with emulators, I decided to make this video to make the process a little easier for anyone who may want to enjoy this fantastic series. So, here's how you can play every game in the Panzer Dragoon series. Starting naturally with the first game. Unlike all the other games, this one was actually ported to PC, so you might think this one's pretty simple. But it's not like you can just grab a copy from Steam or any other modern platform. And even if you do get a copy, the process of getting it running is about as tedious as getting the game to run on an emulator. And while there are a few benefits like being able to play in widescreen, I don't think it's worth the hassle compared to using an emulator. And besides, I never found a way to get a controller to work with the PC version, and playing it on keyboard is kinda clunky. And so we look to Saturn emulation. First of all, I would encourage you to support the official product whenever you can. Obviously, you can't buy the old Sega Saturn games in any way that would benefit Sega or the now defunct development team, but you can purchase the remake of the first game on pretty much any platform you like, and Orta is still available on Xbox, and it even comes packaged with the first game, but we'll come back to that. Point is, pay for the product when you can. Now, there are a few different emulators to choose from, and each have their pros and cons. I decided to go with whatever would run the games well and allow me to enhance the resolution. In the case of the first game, this led me to an emulator called Kronos, specifically the version wrapped in a program called RetroArch. The good news is that this emulator can be used for all three Saturn games. The other two games will require a little more legwork, but we'll get there in the end. Alright, let's start by downloading the emulator. I'll have links for most of the stuff I cover in the description, but here we want to go to retroarch.com, and then right here on the front page we can go to Get RetroArch. And then we want to go with probably the stable version. The nightly version is going to be a little less reliable. And then you can just save that wherever you like. I guess I'll just throw this on the desktop. So that gives us, this is probably a zip file. It's a setup file. Okay. This part's pretty self-explanatory. Just kind of breeze on through it. I'm going to say go ahead and install that. I don't see what problems that would bring. Once again, pretty straightforward stuff. Don't want a Bing bar. Thank you. So now we have RetroArch itself. So this is an emulator system with a bunch of different emulators in it. Full screen that, I guess. So the cores are the emulators, essentially. So we want to get Kronos. So we'll load a core. As you can see, there is a lot. I'll go down to K. Or sorry, go down to S because we're looking for the Saturn. Sega Saturn. And then, yep, this one right here. That'll give us Kronos. Boom. And I think that's essentially ready to go. You can right-click to back out of stuff. It shows the controller prompts down there, but if you want to go back, you can just right-click. So I think the next step would be to get the game itself. Now this is the part where I have to be a little vague, unfortunately, and it goes back to the point I made earlier of purchasing the product when you can. Obviously that isn't really possible with these old Panzer Dragoon games anymore, but basically in order to be able to play these games on RetroArch, you need the ISO file for the given game. And I'll just say, if you look for it, you can probably find it. So once you get your Panzer Dragoon ISO, let's say you get it in a zip file of some kind, you can just extract it wherever you like. Once again, shouldn't take too long. I imagine it's a fairly small file. It's almost 30 years old. Okay, so what do we got in here? There's multiple bin files and then a Q file. The Q file is going to be the important one. So now that that's extracted, we can go back into RetroArch. And then under the main menu, we want to go to load content. That's going to be our game. So in my case, again, you can put your stuff wherever you like, but mine is on the desktop. So we'll just navigate to there. There we go. So we're at the desktop. We'll jump into that folder that had all the files, the ISO and whatnot. Or I guess they're bin files. So this won't really recognize any of the bin files. You can keep them in the folder, but the important one is that Q file. Now, we won't be able to play the game just yet because we still need a BIOS for the Sega Saturn. Now, I do have to be a little vague here once again, but if you look for a BIOS, you will find it. So I've got one right here. It was in a zip file. I just extracted it. This is the folder that it gave me. Now, we want to take the contents of this folder and put it into the system folder. Now, by default, RetroArch installs in the C drive. Under C, RetroArch Win64. So I'm going to go into the system folder here and just drop everything in there. Now, in my case, this still did not work. I think for some it might, but in order to get it working, you may have to take your bin file. In this case, it was a Sega Saturn BIOS parentheses USA. I went in and changed the name to Saturn_BIOS.bin. Because if you go down to settings here and then core, manage cores, and then you click on Kronos, you may see some information here. It says missing Saturn_BIOS.bin. So I figured I'll just change the name to that. And now the game should work. So let's load content. See Saturn. Once again, it's in whatever folder you decide to put it in. For me, I made a Saturn folder. Panzer Dragoon. Q file. Before I start it, I'm just going to go ahead and plug in my controller. RetroArch is pretty accommodating from what I've found. So I'm using a DualSense controller, as you can see there. Should work basically automatically. Gonna go full screen here. So as you can see here, the game is working as it should. I'm flying around, shooting stuff, using the laser, all good. But we can do more. If you hit F1 on your keyboard, you can bring up the menu. And then we can go to Core Options. And here we can go Resolution. I'm not sure that this actually does anything, but we'll bump it to 1080. Actually, I was wrong. It looks like altering that resolution does do something. However, we do have to restart, so I'm just going to hit escape a couple times, and then I'll go back to the RetroArch folder and go to the application, wherever the heck it is. Here we go. And we'll just load it up once again. All right, as you can see, we're running once again at a higher resolution, detecting a little bit of slowdown at 1080 here. It's going to depend on your build and whatnot. I'm currently using a Dell laptop. I think if you have like a mid-range build, you could probably handle this at 1080 fairly easily. Or it could do 720 or something, or just keep it at the normal resolution. Those depend on what you're working with. One other thing I do want to point out, I mean, there are some other functions you can mess around with in RetroArch. They've got I'm just going to pause here. They've got a quick save, quick load function, save state, I guess it's called. So if you hit F2 on there, that's save state. And then I think F3, well, that shows your FPS. F4 maybe? Yes. So F4 will load your save state. This game does not have saving, and it's hard as hell, so not a bad thing to have. Yeah, getting quite a bit of slowdown there. So yeah, once again, that's going to depend on your build, but on my main computer, this runs pretty flawlessly at 1080. There are one or two other things to note. For example, under core options, Force HLE BIOS is something you can toggle on if you run into issues with this game or one of the other Panzer Dragoon games. I think I switched it on at some point. So that's a potential fix for a potential problem. I can't really say much more beyond that. I think that is about it. For the original Panzer Dragoon, you should be able to just, play through the game normally at this point. So we can move on to Panzer Dragoon Zwei. So for Panzer Dragoon Zwei, we will once again bring in our ISO files. Once again, I had it in a zip file, so I just extracted it to the desktop. And let's open RetroArch again. We'll make a desktop shortcut. Why not? Show more options. Create shortcut. And then we'll move that to the desktop. There we go. This is just a setup file. We can delete that. Okay. Open up RetroArch. Load content. In this case, I just left that one on the desktop. So, boom, boom. Desktop. We're going to go into the Zwei folder. Once again, it has a bunch of bin files in it, which don't show up here. But the Q one is what we want. So we'll load that up. All right, so we're starting up the game, and you'll notice that the resolution bump has carried over from our previous game because it's like a core setting. So it's also applying to Panzer Dragoon. You'll also notice things are running a little slow. Once again, I'm running this on an older laptop, and I've bumped the resolution up. So you can mess around with the resolution settings to meet your needs. This is running pretty poorly, frankly. I guess there's a lot more going on under the hood here. I am also recording with OBS at the same time, so might run a little better if I had that closed. So I was honestly anticipating running into a problem here because a few months ago when I first played this game, this was not working properly. Pretty much everything was invisible because the current version of RetroArch that I was using, it just wasn't compatible with this game. And same goes for the following game, Saga. Now, this could happen again, so I will go ahead and go through the next step to troubleshoot if that happens to you. If you load up and your character is invisible, all the enemies are invisible, you can basically see the ground and just maybe one or two other assets. I'll walk you through what you got to do. So I have a version of RetroArch, specifically a DLL file, the core for Kronos, that I know works. So I will provide a link to that in the description. So we're back in our RetroArch folder here. This is the file in question, Kronos libretro.dll. Again, this is from an older Kronos version, probably sometime in 2023 or maybe 22. I don't remember. But I know this one works for both Zwei and Saga. So we want to go to inside our RetroArch folder. We want to go to cores, and you'll see there's one already here. You can grab this file, which again is in the description. Just take it, drop it in there, and it's going to ask you what you want to do with it. We want to replace the one that's already in there. Boom. So now you've got the older version, and if you want to go back to the new version, you can either create a backup of the DLL file that was already in there, which frankly I should have done just now. Oh well. The other solution is you can just go back to retroarch.com and re-download it. So just for the heck of it, I'm going to load up RetroArch again, boot up the game, and show that it should be working properly. So there you go. Once again, we're back in the game and it's working as it should. It does seem like the performance is maybe a little better in that newer build. So that's something to keep in mind. But if you run into a problem where you reach a certain level where the game doesn't work anymore, or once again, they release a new build where the game doesn't work at all, you can use the link to the file in the description, and that should set you straight. It looks like we're running a little more smoothly now. And aside from that, you should be good to go on Panzer Dragoon Zwei, and actually, you should be good to go for Panzer Dragoon Saga as well. So as with the other games, I've got my files here for Panzer Dragoon Saga. The difference with this one, obviously, is that the game took place over 4 discs, as opposed to the other 2, which were just 1. So that does make things a little bit trickier, but not too much. You just need to get your ISO files for your 4 discs, and then just like before, you go into RetroArch, and you go into the folder for disk 1, and you load it up, just like the prior games. And I do get some very noticeable slowdown here. That's partly because I'm recording with OBS at the same time, and partly just my laptop that I'm using for this tutorial being, several years old. But otherwise, it works perfectly normally. I know for sure that the Kronos version that I have linked in the description works, for the entirety of the game. I did do some testing with the new version as well, and it does seem to also work. And in addition, it solves a problem that I actually had with this game, which was whenever there were dialogue scenes that were not actual cutscenes, the audio would skip every 10 seconds. It would stutter. I'll show an example here. So that was pretty distracting, but it seems in the newest Kronos version, assuming that there are no other problems with it and it works through the entirety of the game, it seems that with the new version, that issue is fixed. So that's good news. So with that, you're pretty much good to go. There is a little bit of a wrinkle with, swapping disks, so I'll get into that right now. So here I'm going to load up a save on my main desktop because I don't want to play through this game for several hours just to show off this little interaction. But whenever it prompts you to change disks, you just go into your F1 menu, you go down to disk control, and you load new disk. And, since I have all mine, in the same folder, just pulls all 4 of them up right there. So in this case, I need disk 4. I click on disk 4, and then it takes me back to the main menu. Now, let's say, which technically this is actually what I just did, but let's say you want to load a save file from disk 4. If you try to open disk 4 straight away inside RetroArch, well, I'll show you what happens. I have a lot more files in this version, but you know, we still got our Q files here. So let's say I know that the save I'm going to is disk 4. I'm going to load up disk 4. Everything looks normal. And then there's no save data. I'm not even sure if this was the issue that I was running into before. I thought it was something else. But maybe this is it, and I have just forgotten. So this is why you load from disk 1. You boot up disk 1, you go through the menus, and you load the save, and then it's going to prompt you to swap disks. You do it, you go to the main menu again, and then you can actually load the game. That's how it works, which is what I just did in the previous clip. But with that out of the way, you should be able to play all the way through Panzer Dragoon Saga with minimal issues. Finally, we'll discuss how to emulate Orta, and this one's pretty simple. Buy an Xbox. Unless you already have one, I guess. Anyway, Microsoft implemented their own emulator inside recent Xbox consoles to be able to play any of the previous consoles' games. I played Orta on an Xbox One X, which allowed me to play somewhere in the 1440p to 4K range. You can emulate this on PC via the XEMU emulator, but the audio is pretty rough. Specifically, the bullets and lasers overpower the rest of the audio. Maybe a future update will fix this, but as of this recording, a genuine Xbox is the way to go. But if that changes, or you're willing to overlook the audio problems, I'll link to a video that I found to be pretty thorough for setting up the emulator. Also, as I mentioned earlier, this game comes packaged with the first game as a bonus mode, although you do have to either beat the game or play for 10 hours or so to unlock it. And with that, you should be all set to blast through the Panzer Dragoon series. If you want to know more about the series, you can check out the review video I just put out that covers all the games, including the remake of the first game and the spiritual successor, Crimson Dragon. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoy the games.